So, can we agree that Black Butler is kinda like the FNAF purple guy of the anime community, in the sense that after it ended, it mysteriously came back, but way more confusing and lore contradicting than ever. And then, it ended once more. And then it came back again. And again. And now one more time. I mean, come on. I know the demons are supposed to be immortal, but this is just too much. At least give some of that power to Orun Host Club or Akatsuki no Yona. I miss them. But I guess I also missed my Victorian goth little guy. And by little guy, I mean this fella.
Yes, my lord.
Isn't he just the best? Hello and welcome, esteemed guests and passengers. This is Lily speaking, and I'll be your captain during this voyage. Today, we're talking about yet another franchise that sprung up from the mind of one Yana Toboso, which also features dark evil forces, doomed found families, deeply traumatic backstories, mystery plots, comedy skits, fashion showcases, and of course, a plethora of very, very, very handsome anime boys. I'm talking about Twisted Wonderland's emo gothic older brother, Black Butler. Black Butler, or Kurotsuji, has always been a guilty pleasure of mine ever since I discovered the world of anime back in middle school. In those days, I'd go through the entire alphabetical list of the animes in the very legal and official site I used to watch the shows. Wink. And I'd mark each entry that caught my interest so I could watch later. Oh, good times, when I had nothing better to do but peruse through various genres of anime without any form of supervision. And look at me now! I'm so normal about fictional characters. I first stumbled upon Black Butler without any warning or preparation, and then I proceeded to watch seasons 1 and 2 pretty much back to back. Immediately, my kid brain latched onto this freak of nature because, duh, he was chemically engineered to be hot. It's a losing battle. But I also liked a lot of the cast and the setting, so of course, I set off to Pinterest to save all the dankest memes about it. Yeah, I know, this stuff at the time was the peak of fandom consumption. But nowadays, just gathering them for this video sent me spiraling with a mix of nostalgia and deeply repressed embarrassment. But it's okay, I embrace the cringe. It sustains me. Jumping forward a few years, I discovered the rebooted content while I was procrastinating on some homework. Such content being, of course, Book of Circus, Book of Murder, and Book of Atlantic. And yes, I was very confused about the story thanks to everything seasons 1 and 2 did at the end. This confusion naturally led me to seeking out the manga, so if you need more of my credentials, check this out. Okay, so I have a few of the editions of the manga. I have the very first volume. It's a little old, so the pages are a little darker, and it's all in Portuguese since I bought it locally, so the translation is a little too on the nose, but you know, it was great at the time to old this, and I think I have basically the entirety of the school arc, the public school arc. I have a lot of volumes about it. This is the end of the public school arc, and then I also have the entirety of the Emerald Witch arc, which I did not remember until I started recording this. Yeah. I have both arcs, and then I started to buy the Blue Cult arc. I have the very first volume of the start of the Blue Cult arc, but I could not find more at the time that I was buying it, so I just couldn't find it anymore, and then I stopped collecting it. But I have a lot. I wish I had the following volumes because a lot of stuff starts happening past this one. But yeah, I have plenty of the manga, and of course I've read it all online too. And I also have this guy. This freak. Yeah, I have this little pull apart little figurine of Sebastian. He's holding a little kitten, and that's it basically. It's a figurine that I bought like I think in 2016. He can pull apart, and there's other parts that I think I lost, but yeah. Sebastian. Suffice to say that while I wouldn't consider myself an expert on everything Black Butler, I have accompanied this franchise for a very long time. So, Imagine my surprise when just out of the blue, Season 4 is announced to be released in the year of our Lord 2024.
Darling! Guess who's back from jail?
The first episodes are already out by the time of this recording, because if there's one thing I'm consistent about is being late to everything. But all of this got me thinking, what is it about Black Butler that holds such a strong grip on the anime community even after all these years? It's pretty rare for old shows to get a proper continuation, much less multiple reboots over the course of 1.5 decades. What sort of demonic charm does Black Butler have over its fanbase that we continue to be drawn towards this franchise time and time again, despite all the horrors and trauma that it puts us through? And what sort of impact has Black Butler left to warrant such a massive celebration for its return? These were all the questions swirling in my mind as I saw the release date of Season 4 get closer and the hype around it get louder. And before I knew it, I was back in the Black Butler deep end.
I could finally leave! Martha, I'm coming home, sweetie! I'm back in the building again!
Detecting the rebirth of my obsession, I thought to myself, what better way to organize my thoughts on this franchise and to celebrate the release of a new arc than to make a video about it? So, I give you the most self-indulgent segments of my channel, where I get so hyperfixated on a topic I have to make a whole presentation about it, and force you guys to see through it with me. This is Fixation Presentation, and the topic of today is Black Butler, the good, the bad, and the nostalgic. So, come with me on a journey down memory lane as we look through what this franchise has to offer, what makes us so addicted to it, and some of its peculiar oddities. Though, I must warn you that viewer discretion is advised. Black Butler hands a lot of dark and messed up themes throughout its storylines. Please prioritize your mental health when deciding whether or not to watch this video. I'm not gonna get into explicit detail about those topics, but they will be present in the discussion, and my opinion on the show is not more important than your well-being, okay? Finally, this isn't meant to be a narrative deep dive of Black Butler's story. If you're looking for that, please check out the creator Pocket Leaves here on YouTube, who's been doing a deep dive of every arc from the manga. It's a really good series of videos and I highly recommend it. For this discussion though, I will be covering events scattered across the majority of the content released so far. So if you don't want any spoilers, this video will unfortunately be full of them. You have been warned. Now, I think it's about time we got started. Whether you're a new guest or a long-time passenger, I do hope you enjoy your stay. Get comfy, grab some snacks, and if you'd like the experience, why not stick around by hitting subscribe and clicking the little bell. That way, you'll get notified about every new journey we take in the future. Alright, strap on your safety belts, keep your limbs inside the vessel, and let's proceed with takeoff. Destination set, Victorian England. Let's go full speed ahead. Black Butler is written and drawn by Yana Toboso, first appearing in Square Enix's shonen manga magazine on September 16, 2006. The first volume was published on February 27th of the following year, and the anime adaptation aired another year later in 2008, produced by A1 Pictures. In the story of Black Butler, we follow the lead character Ciel Phantomhive, a 13-year-old boy living in London, England during the Victorian era. Ciel is the lord of the Phantomhive earldom, so we're also introduced to the staff that works at his manor and serve as the supporting cast in many of the arcs. There's Mayrin, the clumsy maid, Finny, the scarily strong gardener, Baldroy, the fire-prone chef, Tanaka, the little guy we keep around, and of course, Sebastian Michaelis, the competent head butler of the manor, and the title character of the series. Because while Ciel is undoubtedly the protagonist, Sebastian plays just as big of a part in the story as the young lord. You see, he isn't just a normal butler, he's one hell of a butler, and by that I mean, he's an actual demon. Ciel isn't just your typical rich earl either. The leaders of this family have been the guard dogs of the Queen of England for generations, dealing with unsavory matters of the criminal underbelly of London's political scene, and ensuring that nothing will harm Her Majesty or her noble associates. It already would be difficult for a fully grown adult to take on that responsibility, and stay alive, just ask Ciel's dead father, but for a little boy to continue this family legacy and maintain such political power alone, yet he can't just do it by sheer force of will. Which is why Ciel employs the services of the one and only Black Butler, forming a demonic contract with Sebastian and having him act as his mentor, servant, bodyguard, attack dog, and ticking time bomb. Because there's more to this contract than just needing protection from the political opposition. Ciel's real goal isn't power or wealth. He's after revenge. When he was just 10 years old, Ciel's entire family was killed in a mysterious attack at their manor, and he lost everything he held dear in the torturous chaos that followed. Rising from the pits of despair and fueled by anger, he took the demon's hand, inheriting the name Ciel Phantomhive and burning away his past. Now, Ciel acts as the Earl to restore his family name while seeking out their murderers, vowing to make them suffer just as much as he did. And once he accomplishes that goal, the same demon that serves him warm tea with delicious biscuits will feast upon his soul instead, snuffing out his life without hesitation. How will Ciel and Sebastian navigate through this conspiracy? Who can they trust? And will the boy hold true to his ambitions, or will he face a tragically early end? Find that out in the next episode of Dragon Butler Ball.
And you are watching Disney Channel.
Okay, jokes aside, isn't this premise just immediately captivating? No wonder people went off the rails for this show during its heyday. The political setting, the character dynamics, the overarching mystery, it hooks you right off the bat and doesn't let go. And yeah, sure, the hot demon man might have helped a bit with the popularity of the franchise. And by that I mean, a huge chunk of it is because of him. It's my personal belief that Sebastian Michaelis was one of the founding fathers of the internet's hot anime man phenomenon. I don't think he was the first. L Death Note already existed by 2006, but unlike L, Sebastian is still alive in his story, charming people to this day, and he definitely left the biggest devastation footprint in the community at large. It's an understatement to say that this guy was popular. Back in the day, his influence was so big, you couldn't escape it even by watching other anime.
Are you Sebastian from Great Butler? You look wonderful!
Yes,
Oh, you look so much like him! Your cosplay's perfect!
I thank you.
People outside of the Black Butler fandom knew about the sexy demon butler and his devilish seductive ways, to the point that just resembling the guy or being able to sound like him could build your career from the ground up. Sebastian walked so Satoru Gojo could run. Your pronouns are he, not him, because you'll never be him. But setting aside the allure of Sebastian's tiny waist, there's plenty more to compel your average viewer into picking up Black Butler. The story and characters, obviously, but also the art, the fashion, the musical soundtrack, the action, the comedy, the historical accuracy? Yeah, okay, no, I don't think a lot of people are drawn to that last one. Sure, the vibes are immaculate, but in terms of being realistic, come on guys, they have cell phones, light sticks, and idol groups. Yana's not here to be accurate, she's here to have fun and draw sexy anime butlers. And you know what? Good for her. My point is, while it's true that Black Butler's fanbase is largely made up of women, there's quite a lot to appeal to other audiences as well. After all, it is published in a shonen magazine, and Yana Toboso herself has once said during an interview that she wasn't sure in what specific genre Black Butler would fit into, since she played with a lot of different approaches to the story. I actually will have more to say regarding this specific comment of hers, so keep it in mind. But for the most part, she is kind of correct. The story arcs wildly shift in their themes, with the plot sometimes being a silly comedy, or a cooking show, or a Titanic adaptation, or a whodunit, or a sports anime with a tournament arc. In some instances, it has cute and fluffy slice-of-life segments, while also managing to be a disturbingly f***ed-up horror story. It even has the aforementioned idol group plotline. During Victorian England, in the same arc with all the piles of dead buried bodies, stolen blood, and discovery of blood group types. Do you see how even we fans can pin down this show? Generally, it's common to label Black Butler as dark fantasy, which encompasses most of the core aspects hidden beneath the silly antics of the characters. But if I had to pick something more specific to slap onto Black Butler as a sales pitch, I'd categorize the whole story in the mystery genre. I mean, if you think about it, there's a mystery plot in every arc so far. The initial mystery of Ciel's contract and Sebastian's existence. Then, the identity of Jack the Ripper, the location of someone's missing person, the disappearing kids, the literal murder mystery, the shady medical experiments, the missing students, the witch disease, Lizzy's disappearance, the purpose of the music hall. More disappearances! There's lots of disappearances! And of course, the questions we still have surrounding the main antagonist's motive and his connections to the plot. Mysteries are the major hooks of every arc. There's something to discover right until the very end, often leaving a hook for the following arc to pick it up. But a story is only as good as the characters that are able to charm the audience into coming along to see it through with them. And Black Butler has plenty of delightful characters to choose from, but undeniably, the most pivotal one for the story is the boy, the myth, the legend, Ciel Phantom Hive, our little guy protagonist who is doomed by the narrative from the start. People tend to like flawed characters. In fact, many say that for a character to have a compelling story, they need to have some sort of imperfection that gives them depth. Hence, the common hatred for Mary Sue's in a lot of media, since the entire world revolves around the wishes and whims of said Mary Sue. And because of that, they're always perceived as being in the right, incapable of mistakes. Even though the term has been thrown around so much lately that the original meaning has been lost on a lot of people, but I digress because that's not the point right now. So, when we look at a character like Ciel, who has an immense amount of wealth, holds a significant political position, and has a literal overpowered demon at his beck and call, doing everything Ciel tells him to do, it would be easy to mistake him for a mean, spoiled, and arrogant little brat who always manages to win in the end, painting the picture of a bland, unlikable protagonist. And while the mean, arrogant, and spoiled parts are very much true,
however, I shall be displeased if breakfast is as ghastly as what you served me this evening. If you can't learn to do more than heat a kettle of milk, I'm going to starve before long.
Ciel is so much more complex, flawed, and nuanced than that. From the very moment he was born, Ciel, or well, the boy we knew as Ciel, was always defined by one thing: being replaceable. As the second youngest twin born from Rachel Phantom Hive, Lord Vincent's wife, Ciel was considered inferior to his twin in every way, on the grounds of his weak health, lack of talent, and meeker disposition. And thus, he wasn't even a desirable backup plan for the true heir, should anything happen to him. Foreshadowing. Ciel was such an afterthought that up until this point in the story, we still don't know his true name, referring to him with the name of his beloved, successful, and talented older brother, the true Ciel Phantom Hive. And this is a detail I'm kinda obsessed with, because it shows the audience how much his original existence was dismissed, and it also gives way to fan theories about his real name. I personally really like the Sirius theory. But then, after the incident, trademark, the horrors Ciel experienced became the catalyst for his messed up, twisted opinions of the world. And the demon whispering in his ear certainly didn't help. From Ciel's point of view, humans are despicable. They're evil, selfish, traitorous, and uncaring liars, the whole lot of them. And Ciel admits that he's not the exception to that.
Right then, what happened here stays between the two of us, yeah?
Yes. Words are cheap. There's no guarantee she won't tell anybody. Why wouldn't she? Humans lie like it's second nature. Myself included, of course.
we're often shown how he sees himself in relation to the people around him. He's the mastermind, the king of the board, the most important player of the game. He towers over all others, not because he's better than them, but because he's not afraid of using them to further his own goals. Ciel lies, he cheats, he manipulates, and he betrays without feeling an ounce of regret about it. Or so he wants us to think. The trick to understanding Ciel is that the narrative goes above and beyond to paint him as this cruel, cold, and calculating person, because that's how he sees himself, and that's how he wants to come across. In the world he deals with, the criminal underbelly of London, he can't afford to be loving and gentle and kind. He saw where that took his parents and his brother. No one asked him to get revenge on their part. He's doing it for himself, so he can feel like he has a semblance of power in this messed up world. So he can feel like he'll never be subjected to that kind of suffering again. Ciel doesn't like humanity. He holds contempt and hatred against people because of everything he went through. He even says as much to Sebastian, as if trying to convince the demon, and also himself, that he's fine with being this way, being like all the other terrible humans around him.
I'm just like them, don't you see? I'm full of it. The same ugliness within them courses through my veins as well. This is just how humans are! Sebastian, do you understand me? It's who we are!
But deep down, he probably feels the guilt and the shame of being, well, human, of being this deplorable, cowardly being that he hates so much. And he clearly feels conflicted about it. But there's nothing he can do to change it. It's just who he is. A 13-year-old human boy who wasn't given a choice. The narrative and even Ciel himself are constantly trying to convince the audience into thinking that he's just this uncaring genius. Because the real him, or well, the old him, the boy that was kind and shy and unassuming, the boy that was insecure about himself, but still wanted to become a toy maker and spread joy to people, the kind-hearted and weak little brother, he should be dead. In our Ciel's eyes, he is dead, burned to ashes along with the cult and the real Ciel's body. In his eyes, that person is no longer supposed to exist. He can't exist, because he isn't the one supposed to carry on his family's legacy. Ciel Phantom Hive is. Not only does our Ciel have this survivor's guilt of being the only one of his family to make it out alive, he also has to live with this constant feeling of self-hatred due to what people told him when he grew up. He chose to take on a false identity because he knows Ciel is the one people wanted alive, not him. Unfortunately for our boy though, he wasn't able to stamp down all the parts of his old self. We often see flashes of real kindness, warmth, and affection slipping through the young lord's mask, showing that the kind boy underneath still exists, even if by a single small whisper. Through Ciel's kinder actions, like comforting Lizzy and Snake in the Campania, or giving each of the servants a safe place in his manor, or saving Wolfram so Sieglinde wouldn't be alone, or placing a red dress on his aunt's coffin, through all of these, there are echoes of the person he used to be, even if he refuses to acknowledge any genuine sentiment behind it, acting like everything he does is part of a great master plan at work. But in reality, he's still a scared, lonely, and angry kid who's afraid of being alone, and yet he refuses to let anyone get close enough to see the cracks in his armor, lest they harm him again. All of this and more helps to build the fascinating and deeply complex main character that Ciel Phantom Hive is. We can find a lot of variations to shonen protagonists and their personalities. More often than not, they fall into the sunshine character trope, where they're kind and bubbly and extroverted and so friendly to the point that they attract many people to their circle of companions. But what makes Ciel so different and unique is that he's almost the opposite of that trope. He's an anti-sunshine character. If you see him smile, there's a 90% chance of it being fake as hell. And he doesn't fall into the grumpy with a secret heart of gold trope very cleanly either. Because while he does indeed do a few good things once in a while, more often than not, he does a lot of bad stuff to a lot of people.
I suppose I could eliminate Clayton and take his place as Blue's Drudge. No, better not.
He fully embraces the evil shit he has to do. In fact, sometimes he enjoys doing such evil shit a little too much. Like how he was internally gloating over the poor suffering students that he poisoned because it was part of his scheme to help his team win and get him closer to his objective. Everything was working just as he planned. He's such an icon. So yes, he killed all the circus people, and he'd do it again. And sure, he helped to traumatize Arthur Conan Doyle into writing more books. But consider this. He really liked those books. And okay, he did frame a guy for a crime he didn't commit as a way to clear up his own name. But the guy was a bitch anyway, so it was fine. And it was a silly little game between him and the queen. How could he not make up an entire convoluted murder plot just for a little bit of harmless fun? You know, minus the guy that Snake killed accidentally. That was an oops. Rest in pieces to that guy. In summary, Ciel looks at the messed up shit he's gonna have to do, maybe feels secretly bad about it for a second, and then he proceeds to do it, because that's the kind of world he lives in now. He can't afford to be weak and lose his one shot at revenge. He can't afford to let himself fall. He's the king piece of the board. If he loses, it's game over. And so, he's willing to sacrifice anything and anyone to fulfill his goal. He knows he's living on borrowed time anyway. Might as well hold on to his ambitions as tight as he can and see this through to the end. Besides, should he falter or let his resolve weaken, the narrative has a failsafe in place to motivate him to stay on track. A very handsome and soul-eating failsafe, in the form of the infernal contract with the demon man himself, Sebastian Michaelis. Let's talk about this freak of nature and his many roles in the story. I think that Sebastian is a big source of comedy in the show, if not the biggest, because we have this guy who is handsome, polite, intelligent, insanely pretty, super competent as a butler, unfairly beautiful, multi-talented in many areas, very invested in his job, unfairly hot. He's just the perfect man, basically. So of course, that means he's also a demon. A demon that fights with table cutlery and is obsessed with cats. And he can't wait to kill this child that he's stuck protecting. Sebastian is so funny because the dynamic that he has, both with the cast and with the story in large, is so unique. I don't think it's ever been replicated in the way Black Butler manages to do it. Because Sebastian is a really powerful demon, being basically immune to harm from any human weapons, and having a ton of vague demon powers that include fixing mansions, summoning food, and conjuring fire. And yet, he's completely detached from the overarching main story mystery. He wasn't involved in the attack of Ciel's family and the following kidnapping. He's not involved in the human conflicts with the Queen, or whatever war she has planned. And he's not involved with the Reaper Society, or with Undertaker's weird obsession with the Phantom High family and defying death. Sebastian has nothing to do with any of these people and their insane shenanigans. He is literally just a guy that was chilling in hell who then got a call from one of his many cults and made a contract with a traumatized child, and is now playing nice until his dinner is done cooking so he can finally go back home. A lot of the times when the audience is presented with a new mystery at the beginning of the arc, both Ciel and Sebastian are just as lost as we are, because he wants nothing to do with all this mess. He's one chill of a butler, and that's just so fucking funny to me. We have this incredibly powerful eldritch demon figure who supposedly is famous enough to warrant an entire cult of rich weirdos worshipping him. And such supernatural horror is just stuck in this weirdly fucked up protector role over a 13-year-old kid that he will eventually kill. Because said kid always manages to get involved in the most messed up conspiracies that a demon has ever seen. A lot of fans joke that eventually, whenever Sebastian goes back to hell, he's gonna have so much tea to spill to the other demons, and I agree, he has lived through some shit.
Oh, thank the hells that's over.
Oh, hey, girl, where have you been?
You were gone for almost 40 minutes. Were you in a contract in the human realm?
Unfortunately, yes. Remember that one cult I had? They had a feral child who wanted revenge, so I figured, hey, how hard can that be? Should be an easy meal.
From your tone, I'm assuming it wasn't like that.
I've never seen a child get involved in so many convoluted situations in all of my life. And somehow, the idol group was still the weirdest part of the whole experience.
Oh shit! Girl, now I'm curious. Spill the tea.
First of all, it offends me that you'd think I would spill any sort of beverage. And second of all, that stuff is disgusting. You won't like it.
No, I mean, tell us how messy it was.
Oh, it was so messy. You won't believe what his twin brother did.
His brother?
His brother!
Sebastian's presence in the story is even more special because he is unique, in the sense that there's no other canonical demons in the story. There's plenty of supernatural elements like zombies, sort of, and werewolves, except not really, and ghosts, arguably, and of course the Reaper Society, who are the actual main supernatural beings in terms of numbers, lore, and relevance to the story. Black Butler dabbles in a lot of myths and spooky figures, but only 2 of those figures are established within the narrative, and this freak is the sole demon representative. It's a setup that helps to frame Ciel's group as the underdogs, no pun intended. They're just a bunch of humans, jury's still out on Snake, and a single demon against the entirety of London and the Afterlife Gardening Corporation. No one has any idea how the story is gonna shape up in the future, and I love that. Plus, while it's implied that Sebastian knows a lot of things about human relations from his past contracts, he's not omniscient. He gets surprised or caught off guard multiple times. Whenever he needs to discover information, he doesn't tap into a secret demon dimension and obtain all the knowledge he needs from there. Instead, he needs to actually talk to suspects, stalk people, steal stuff, or seduce vulnerable sad women. And he does all of that while serving, because he can't not serve. He also has to learn how to pose as a human butler, how to properly cook and brew tea in accordance to Ciel's tastes, how to clean up the dust and dispose of the intruders, how to manage a stable work and life balance, how to coordinate all of the assassins that they have instead of professional staff, how to pet all the cats in existence. There's a very brief panel during the Book of Atlantic flashback where you can see Sebastian studying during the night, so he can be a proper fake butler to a fake earl. And that's a really nice detail, because it makes for a great juxtaposition between Sebastian being an overpowered demonic creature, but also just barely human enough to fool both the characters and the audience. We're made to think that he isn't perfect, and that he does have flaws, which helps to humanize him and lower our guards. It also helps that Sebastian is very expressive. More often than not, we see him happy with this charming, polite, pretty little smile, meant to trap other people into his facade. Is he capable of being happy? I mean, he laughs a lot, so it's obvious he finds things amusing, but what about genuine happiness? Maybe if a kitty is around, but that's the most we can be certain of. Does he even have human-like emotions? According to the manga, he doesn't have the capacity to feel anything that would make him tear up. And yet, we see him get angry, surprised, offended, and annoyed at people. Does he mourn for any human lives? You'd think not, given how little he cares about other humans, and yet he does smallest bit impressed with Lizzy's abilities, or amazed at Agni's general existence, or surprised with the new facets he discovers about Ciel's twisted soul. There are so many moments where it's unclear what he's thinking about, or what his expression truly means. In fact, I would love to try and understand his relationship with Agni, because it genuinely makes my brain itch. The panel where Agni calls Sebastian his friend, and we get this close-up of Sebastian's expression as he processes that statement, and then we don't get to see his face in the final shot, but Agni is smiling, and he says that it's the first time anyone has said that to him. I am going to drastically change the trajectory of Yana Toboso's life, because what the f*** is this? I swear, I'm gonna continue to think about the layers upon layers of the onion that is Sebastian until the day I'm under a pile of dirt. Saying that this clown is mysterious would be an understatement, but that's also part of his charm, given how infuriatingly compelling he is to dissect, and how his true nature will likely remain a mystery long after the story is done. It also doesn't help that he is very pleasing to look at. Yes, he's often used as eye candy, but it's a kind of fan service that's also like very unlike the norm being shirtless chests and chiseled abs. Yeah, he does occasionally show some skin, but I would argue that Sebastian is at his sexiest when he's entirely covered up and yet just barely showing something. This is the Victorian era after all. Even Yana herself, when drawing an erotic expression for Sebastian, chose to draw his gloved hands being exposed. Good lord. Amazing taste at picking a human form, my guy. 10 out of 10. However, hey, what do you need that small waist for, So other men can grab it? I know what you are, you ho. On top of it all, Sebastian is also incredibly silly, because I fully believe that, deep down, he enjoys playing butler. Some small, tiny, minuscule part of his being is way too committed to the bit, and I love him for that. This is actually one of the best and most reoccurring jokes of the story, and that Sebastian is so OP and so detached from the conflicts, the highest stakes for him are related to his carefully planned schedule, and if the weekly assassination attempts will ruin his dinner plans for the young lord.
I'm so terribly sorry. I've committed a blunder unacceptable for a Phantom Hive butler. How can I ever atone? I hang my head in shame. Dinner is not ready.
Sebastian gets riddled with bullets? Man, now he's gonna have to repair that coat. Ciel gets kidnapped? Man, he's gonna need to waste his delicious pie while saving him. There's a German warfare plan to make chemical weapons? Yeah, okay, cool. He has breakfast to arrange, so if you could just speed this up, it would be lovely. Only 3 things matter to this guy: his food, his butler aesthetic, and fluffy kittens. He's just like me, for real. And you know what? It would be remiss of me to not mention how much Ciel is also a very funny little guy.
Ciel, I'll trounce you into oblivion, just you wait!
No, please have mercy.
He's not a constant source of comedy, which is why I didn't mention this during his section, but since we are on the topic, I had to give him some credit as well. This is a 13-year-old. He is 3 apples tall and can't tie his own shoes. And yet, he's also the Earl of a giant province of land. He is the CEO of a bunch of successful company branches going from perfumes to toys. He has so much paperwork to sign and so many political conspiracies to deal with. But his hands are tiny! And he needs to finish it all before his 8 p.m. bedtime, where he curls up with a giant stuffed rabbit that his company produced, and he goes, me, 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 me. He is this big, tiny, hilarious, evil mastermind child. I love him so much.
I accidentally girl bossed too hard, and now I have a real job with real responsibilities, and like people keep emailing me and asking me questions, and I don't know the answer, and I'm just really stressed out, and I don't want a girl boss anymore.
Anyway, going back to the butler, all of this and much more ends up making Sebastian stand out as a pretty irreplaceable part of the story. Ciel is the main character, sure, but Sebastian is the title character. He's the second protagonist, the comic relief, the poster boy, the thirst trap, the official baby girl, and, beneath all those layers, he's also kind of a hidden antagonist. Because unless something deeply fundamental about the plot changes, and Ciel somehow dies from falling off a comically tall cliff, Sebastian will eventually be the cause of his death. That is the nature of their contract and the source of their fucked up relationship. Sebastian is just biding his time until Ciel gets the revenge out of his system, one way or another. So then he can finally get his hard-earned meal and go back to terrorizing the demon planes. The core of Black Butler revolves around these two, and the mind games that they play on one another. Hunter and prey, master and servant, the power dynamics and schemes. Their relationship has so many complicated angles, it's probably one of the biggest hooks to draw people into the story. But before we analyze Sebastian's and Ciel's canon dynamic, let's address the elephant in the room, and talk about a few of the controversial topics that come up when discussing Black Butler, the main one being Sebastian. I went back and forth on whether or not I should include this section because it's not exactly something I'm comfortable with. However, since I'm determined to give at least a basic overview on the main aspects that make up Black Butler, I felt like it would be disingenuous of me to just ignore this, since it arguably was, and sort of still is, a giant part of the fandom works and discussions around this franchise as a whole. I'm of course referring to the romantic reading of Ciel and Sebastian, aka Sebastiel.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Now, I have zero interest in dictating what anyone consumes online. I don't have the time nor the energy to even think about doing that. What you do in your own plot of internet land is not my problem. My shipping policy is, to quote Markiplier, you do you and I'll do me and we won't do each other. So, if you like Sebastiel, good for you, I guess. Because I certainly won't be wasting my time trying to convince you otherwise. Telling anyone to not do something is the surefire way to make them do that very thing even more, just to spite you. I won't perceive you, and I'd recommend that you also don't perceive me either, since my content definitely won't suit your tastes, much like this video. But hey, if you wanna comment and yell at me, go for it. It's gonna help the video engagement anyway. So no, I don't like Sebastiel at all. It was the ship back then, but thankfully fandom culture has shifted a lot over the years, including in the Black Butler fandom. Though I also do know that the Sebastiel shipping circles still exist nowadays, especially with the new season coming out. But even so, it's up to each individual person to decide how they feel about the ship. I'm really only in charge of my opinion here, and I've made peace with the fact that Sebastiel is, to put it mildly, not something I wanna see. It's completely removed from my personal comfort zone, and I can enjoy the show just fine without liking it. I say this because I've seen plenty of people say, oh, why do you bother consuming Black Butler content if you don't enjoy Sebastiel? Implying that this reading of them is essential to one's enjoyment of the story. And, I think that's a really bad take. There's so much to enjoy about Black Butler without you needing to be into Sebastiel. But, like I said, I have zero interest in wasting my time listing off all the things I don't like about the ship, or confronting the shippers about it. If I see something I don't enjoy, or someone I don't agree with, I just block them and move on. Or, I choose to not perceive it and delude myself into thinking that it just doesn't exist. It's very easy to do. I don't like confrontation, especially if it's something very questionable from the actual source material. I am looking at you, corset scene, you know what you did. So please, consume content responsibly and critically, and prioritize your own comfort in the social media platforms that you engage in. Fandom spaces nowadays are so big and so connected, you're bound to find a few people that share the same opinions as you eventually. So just don't waste your time in parts of the fandom that you don't enjoy. Go find your own circle and enjoy the content that matches your personal boundaries, okay?
Child. Anyway, so...
Okay, now that that's all addressed, I do want to briefly talk about how big Sebastião was and how much Black Butler's image revolved around it. If you're very uncomfortable with this topic and want to skip ahead, here's the timestamp for the next video chapter. I won't linger here too long or go into too much detail. This is mainly to look back on how things were back then and how Yana Toboso's reputation helped to influence some of it. Alright, so if a piece of media exists, shipping will soon follow. It does not need to have multiple characters, it does not need to have human characters, and it does not need to be in the same universe. If the fandom wills it, so it happens. We saw that happen with Supernatural before they introduced the super hell gay angel, and we saw that happen with the Onceler and the multiples of himself, and we saw that happen with Sebastião. Shipping will always find a way, even if you don't like it. So, thinking back to early Black Butler, whose main target audience was tween girls, it's very easy to connect the dots on how a controversial ship like Sebastião ended up becoming so popular. Based on the comments I've seen from some grown-up fans, they either shipped it because they were projecting themselves onto Ciel's place in order to kiss the hot demon, or they shipped it because they liked BL pairings and this was just another one of them. It's a canon event, really. Every young and unsupervised anime watcher eventually experiences their first deeply messed up anime ship. Mine was actually tied between Vampire Knight and Shugo Kiara, because on one hand, you have the 17-year-old going after the 12-year-old, but on the other hand, you have the entirety of Vampire Knight. I still don't know which was more traumatic or how it all flew over my head back then. Therapy is expensive, but talking about your first fucked up anime ship on the internet is free. So leave a comment down below if you've experienced any of those and let's all heal together. And actually, it's kind of funny. During this renaissance period of the fandom, I discovered a whole new world when it comes to Black Butler shipping. I had almost never seen this loser being shipped with actual adult characters. So in my head, he was just stuck inside a jar for everyone's safety and well-being. But now, my mind has been open to the truth. There's so many characters I'd be delighted to see absolutely wreck the hell out of this butler. Destroy this man. Put him in his place. Except for her. Girl deserves so much better than him. I can make you happy, my queen. Please give me a chance. Anyway, back to my original topic, another thing that helped to spread the word of Sebastião was a little rumor going around at the time, saying that Black Butler was initially supposed to be a BL, but that Yana Toboso was supposedly prohibited from writing it because of publishing laws or censorship or whatever. And before anyone takes up arms to demand the release of the Yana Toboso cut, you can rest easy, because this rumor is false. It's completely fake news made up in the fandom circles and spread around without any proof.
You really think someone would do that? Just go on the internet and tell lies?
The most common theory is that this rumor somehow started as a way to validate shipping Sebastião, since then it would be going along with Yana's supposedly hidden secret agenda. My personal conspiracy theory is that I think this whole thing started out with a twisted version of Yana's original comments regarding Black Butler's story genre that I mentioned way earlier in the video. I think that people took that comment and slowly passed it around through a version of internet telephone game, until eventually it became the supposed to be a BL narrative. But hey, that's just a theory. Again, and if the rumors and general fandom shipping weren't enough, the knowledge about Yana's previous works certainly helped to fuel the fire even more. In case you didn't know, Yana Toboso has released a few works under a different pen name, Yanao Rock, and such works feature BL relationships with quite the big age gap, aka they fall into the shotacon genre. Because of this, it wasn't hard to make a few assumptions about Black Butler, which, in all fairness, doesn't have anything actually explicit happen on screen, but it still has plenty of questionable scenes to bait shippers and provide fan service. Now, I don't particularly hate Yana Toboso. In fact, speaking as an aspiring artist, I'm obligated to praise her style because holy shit, her improvement over the years is insane. It's one of the biggest factors that make me reread the manga so much, despite all the horrors. Her style is so good, I just wanna... So yeah, aside from that, I don't have any particularly strong feelings about Miss Yana as a person. But oh boy, I sure have some thoughts about her writing and marketing decisions. Because regardless or not of hidden intentions, the fact of the matter is that she and the other people in charge of adapting and promoting Black Butler all knew that Sebastiel was one of the biggest selling points during the peak popularity, either because people liked it and talked about it, or because people hated it and still talked about it. One way or the other, the IP was getting a lot of attention and promotion, which in turn generated revenue. And we all know that money is all that matters in the end. So it can't be denied that after a certain point, Sebastiel was probably intentionally being put into Black Butler to feed the very vocal target audience. The existing manga scenes were adapted and even original anime ones were created. But putting aside fandom shipping or marketing strategies, if the casual viewer thinks about the narrative implications for a single second, it all just feels really weird.
Brother, what's that?
Because canonically, Ciel is still a child with severe SA-related trauma, all done by despicable and vile adults. So it ends up being insanely tone deaf to constantly put him in situations where he is being manhandled or harassed by questionable grown men. I am looking at Viscount Druid and blowing him up with my mind. If you've been following the manga, however, you can see that, at the very least, Yana has moved away from blatant bait scenes as the years went by. Though Ciel and Sebastian hadn't properly appeared in the story in almost 5 years. Except now, they're going to get a whole section of the current arc just for them. So you're on thin f***ing ice, Yana. I guess my point is that even if I appreciate Yana's works and enjoy her art, I can't help but question a lot of her decisions. In a similar vein, she also plays into a lot of bad and harmful stereotypes when it comes to her Indian and Chinese characters. Plus, her occasional use of the classic anime tropes can go from mildly uncomfortable to increasingly unnecessary. We're gonna talk about Siglinde's jokes, don't you worry about it. Now, like I said, I don't particularly have any bones to pick with Miss Yana, but I don't want to sit here and pretend that the whole 2 works of hers that I enjoy are flawless in every way. Check out my Twist videos to know my criticisms about that. And hey, I'm used to being constantly disappointed for expecting better, because aside from Yana's involvement, Twist also has the unfortunate circumstance of having the rat's filthy paws all over it. I just can't ever win, so at this point I'm a pro at putting on my clown makeup. But regardless of my opinion, Yana will continue to have her massive hot anime boy empire, and the demon variant, by the looks of things, will never die, no matter how much time passes. Meanwhile, we have all the information we need to decide how we're willing to engage with this material, and what sort of reading we want to have on it. Because once again, whatever you consume, whatever content you enjoy, and whatever media you engage in online, do so responsibly. Seek out the information available, respect other people's boundaries, and be aware of your own as well. And above all, don't forget about the block button. Cater your own internet space to your own comfort. It's a very therapeutic experience, trust me. Okay, I'm glad I got all of that out of my system so I can go back to being very normal about these characters and talk about things I actually enjoy, like their actual dynamic in the story. Please be aware that from this point forward, whenever I talk about these two's relationship, it will be from a platonic angle. In my perfect world, all grown men would be kept away from this child, but unfortunately, he's bound to this demon until his dying breath. So, let's discuss how they can barely stand one another and yet are also all that each other has. Oh yeah, It's all coming together. Sebastian and Ciel are stuck together, and they don't really have much choice about it. The real Ciel was chosen by pure coincidence and sacrificed. Then, Ciel's hatred ended up being enough to open the gates to allow Sebastian to cross over, and the kid was kind of forced to make a contract with the demon so they wouldn't waste his brother's traded soul. And now, Ciel has no choice but to hold on to that hatred in order to fulfill his revenge. Or else, the demon will kill him the moment he deviates from the contract. From the very beginning, their situation revolves around the loss of choice, how life is unjust and cruel, and how we often can't do anything to change it. If you were to ask either of them, they both would affirm their very justified hatred for the other. Ciel trusts Sebastian as far as he can throw him, which isn't very far given that he's a tiny little lad. From the very beginning, Ciel has been cautious of the demon and what he could provide through the contract. One of the very first things that Sebastian attempted to do was to trick Ciel into thinking that his brother was still alive. Because while he can't bring back the dead, he sure as hell can gaslight his contractor into thinking their deceased loved ones are still alive and well. How nice of him. That's why every clause that Ciel established into the contract was a no bullshit clause. Sebastian can't betray him, can't let him come to harm, and most importantly, can't lie to him. He's keeping that demon on a tight leash. Because of the huge shit show that Ciel had just gone through, he knew that he couldn't afford to trust anyone easily, especially the eldritch creature that had just eaten his brother's soul and was just beyond themselves with glee at the prospect of having another one to feast upon. As for Sebastian himself, he really is in this whole mess just for the food. He has no horses in this race, and he's been shown to be more than willing to manipulate Ciel into a false sense of security, so the boy can loosen his grip on the revenge that keeps Sebastian on the previously mentioned tight leash. Not only that, but the moment that this demon feels the smallest hint of insecurity and vulnerability from this, very traumatized child, his first instinct is to make things worse. Sebastian will absolutely bite the hand that feeds him without any hesitation. It's in his nature as a demon. He will always view Ciel as his eventual feast once this whole ordeal is done.
I don't want to eat candy, but the parasites in me want the candy. I don't want to drink liquor. I don't like liquor. But the parasite, the demon in me, it wants the liquor.
Not to mention how the boy is spoiled, cruel, downright rotten. He gives Sebastian these insane requests and expects them to be done perfectly. I mean, they will be. And Sebastian is more than capable of accomplishing his tasks as the flawless butler that he is. But it wouldn't hurt to be a little nicer about it, This is mostly a joke, but based on Sebastian's inner and outer thoughts, we see that he really doesn't respect Ciel a lot of the time. Mainly when the kid is, behaving like a kid.
Most excellent, my lord. May I be so bold as to inquire after your inspiration for the name? Was that what your last butler was called?
No. It was my dog's name.
On second thought, what a spoiled, nasty little brat I've saddled myself with.
When Ciel is bratty and stubborn and prone to anger, ooh, that really grinds Sebastian's gears. Because to a demon like him, I imagine that's a little embarrassing and maybe slightly infuriating to be tied down by a pathetically fragile creature such as a small, sickly human child. Alas, he abides by the demon union laws, so he'll do what he has to do and eventually get his just desserts. This plays into the illusion of a power dynamic, because while Sebastian poses as a butler and lets Ciel think that he's in control of his every move, the reality is that Sebastian is only kept in line by Ciel because he allows himself to be bossed around. If he wasn't interested in seeing all of this play out, he could easily end their game whenever he wanted. So in summary, the two of them have these incredibly tense and hostile feelings as the basic foundation to their relationship. By all purposes, they should hate each other. And they do. But is that all? Because you see, Ciel wants to build connections so bad. He wants to be needed, and he wants to have someone he can fully trust. He's just a kid, and he's gone through so much shit. It's inevitable that he's starved for a source of genuine comfort and security and love. But he can't have that. He can't trust anyone. Not after what happened to him and his brother back then. Even his idolized view of said brother was shaken after the guy defied death through illegal means, called Ciel a fraud, kicked him out of the house, and got him arrested. I'm an only child, but I imagine that this is just usual business for siblings. Cain and Abel truly were the blueprint. Also, since I'm not gonna talk too much about the real Ciel in this video, this is as good a time as any for me to expose my truth. Every time I read chapter 141, where they reveal the big twist of how the real Ciel has always been watching our Ciel throughout the entire story, I can't help but remember this very specific clip. If I had to live with this, so do you now. But back to my point. Ciel doesn't have anyone he can truly rely on, even his remaining family or his few one-sided friends. The only person he has is Sebastian, whom, due to the contract, is obligated to be reliable. And that's where the dramatic irony for their dynamic truly hits. It loops back to that lack of choice theming. Ciel has no choice but to rely on Sebastian, since he knows it's in the demon's best interest to follow the contract. Meanwhile, Sebastian has no choice but to care for Ciel's well-being and success, since that will determine the fulfillment of Ciel's revenge and thus guarantee Sebastian's meal. And so they're kind of placed in a standstill. They can't get rid of each other, and so they have no choice but to work together and avoid unnecessary setbacks to their progress. This amicable truce between them helps to trick the audience, and even Ciel himself, into believing that maybe the two of them have established a genuine friendly bond over the years that they spent by each other's sides. And yet, during the Emerald Witch arc, we were forced to confront the reality that, regardless of any emotional attachment, Sebastian should be the last creature that Ciel puts his trust in, as he was deadly serious about consuming Ciel's soul during a moment of severe distress that wasn't even the kid's fault. He was having a trauma response, you insufferable prick. At least give him a second to recover. Sebastian is the personification of Ciel's isolation. He can't have close friends or colleagues. He can't have a normal school life. He can't have moments of weakness because he's the queen's guard dog. And should he wish to stop being that, then that's okay. He'll just be forced to deal with a very disappointed Sebastian and an earlier than planned grave. On the flip side, Sebastian is certainly amused by all the human antics that he observes, and is maybe sorta able to feel something towards a very specific selection of humans, but he's always aware of his true purpose in this human plane. He always stands firm that his end goal is to obtain Ciel's soul. Sooner or later, this game of theirs will end. The demon will no longer play house and act as the fussy Phantom Hive butler, and that will be the end. At least, it should be. Right? Because they can't get attached. They can't be friends. They can't form a vague, unstable, slightly toxic bond. But they don't have a choice in the matter. Unfortunately for them, but very fortunately for me, who eats this shit up, Sebastian's and Ciel's back and forth of to trust or not to trust ends up making them run into a very common issue that appears when you're in forced proximity with someone. You usually end up caring about the people who you spend a lot of time with. Whenever you see someone with a constant frequency, it's easy to get used to that person's presence, sometimes to the point of being comfortable or vulnerable around them. So, do I think that they generally ended up caring for one another? That's subjective at best, but I personally think that, I think that somehow over the 3-ish years that they spent together, a sort of weirdly codependent, toxic-ass friendship ended up forming between the two of them. They work in harmony very easily, with Sebastian knowing exactly what buttons to push in order to give Ciel a hard time. And Ciel, for his part, is very much aware of how Sebastian's view of the world works, which means he doesn't hesitate to boss him around, knowing exactly what the demon is capable of. This leads into a bit of a comedic approach, because Ciel is constantly taking credit for what Sebastian did, lying through his teeth and pretending to be a nice little boy, and all the demon can do is stand there and stare at the audacity of this child. Yes, I cleaned this whole room using a broom. Yes, that thing I know how to use. And I used my own hands to sift through the garbage so I could find the evidence against you, because I just can't stand injustices. Lying to others is just terrible.
This kid so better be fucking worth it. I swear to God.
But if we look past the friendly bickering meant to disguise their disdain for one another, there's a few moments that still make you wonder if, deep down, there's a hint of genuine care. Like when Ciel is sick from the werewolf curse and Sebastian tells Finny to prepare some warm milk with honey for the young lord, since it was Ciel's comfort meal when he felt vulnerable. When the smallest bit of possible harm may come to Ciel, Sebastian immediately flips the switch, losing his cool, confident persona and rushing to the nearest person able to help him. And sure, 99% of this might be just him making sure his food doesn't die from a freaky human disease. But I think that it would make their dynamic even more complex and heartbreaking if that remaining 1% genuinely existed, where the smallest part of Sebastian wanted to ensure that Ciel was safe just because. I don't think we'll ever know for certain if that's true, and that's truly fascinating. On Ciel's end of things, it's a little difficult to pinpoint a lot of moments of maybe true affection towards Sebastian, but that's mainly because Ciel hardly shows that to anyone really, which is why the few moments that he does are so memorable. I would say that the biggest example we have is at the end of Book of Atlantic, when Sebastian was basically beaten to a bloody pulp, and Ciel not only gave him a compliment, but also told him to rest when they got home. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that this was the first time so far where Ciel gave a genuine compliment to Sebastian for his efforts, not counting the times where he boasts about having a capable butler during his shady political conversations. Even Sebastian was weirded the fuck out by this. It's that rare of an occurrence.
Sebastian, in your current condition, you won't be able to attend me as a proper butler should. Once we've returned to the manor, I want you to rest. You did quite well today.
My lord. Please, you must stop. It isn't at all like you to say such things. If you're not careful, you'll call a storm down upon us.
As a side note, the bonus manga chapter that features Sebastian's day off is genuinely so funny and sweet. It's a shame that it's not gonna be adapted. It has the peak comedic dynamic between these two and all the staff. I suppose my point to this section is that there's certainly a bond here, but I sure as hell can't explain what it is. It looks like a friendship, which maybe got set back to square one after Sebastian's just a little bite incident in Germany. It looks like a keep your friends close and your enemies closer tactic, despite the fact we often forget that they can be considered enemies. And in another twist of dramatic dramatic irony, it also looks like another case of the trope of, whoops, this adult person I need to rely on for my safety and survival accidentally became my parental figure. Because yeah, weirdly enough, Sebastian also kinda became Ciel's only parental figure. Sure, there's other adults in this kid's life who aren't fucking weird-ass creeps, but none of them are reliable enough as mentors or parental figures. Balduroy is nice, but also a hot, exploding mess. Didrik is in gay mourning, plus he lives in Germany, and Tanaka is a grandpa figure on life support.
Until he becomes a backstabbing traitor.
I know I just spent this entire section talking about how fascinatingly twisted and weird Sebastian and Ciel's dynamic is, but it's also undeniable that despite how deadly this freak can be, he unfortunately also is one of the few constant and reliable adult presences in Ciel's life. There's just Sebastian, the occasional mid-fourth family appearances, and the house servants, and only two of those are always by Ciel's side, through thick and thin, going with the young lord in almost every dangerous mission he's sent on, and essentially becoming the people that he allows to see through a few of his masks, becoming his second family, his found family. And yes, the demons included too. There are plenty of beloved side characters in Black Butler, but the ones most favored by both the narrative and the fandom would be the Phantom Hive manor servants. When a story favors the rich and or noble person, the servant character can fill a multitude of roles, from being the comic relief meant to bounce off the energy of the protagonist, to being a personal source of comfort and friendship to the lead, to just being genuinely friendly but overall lacking in personality. That way, the protagonist has someone to talk to instead of monologuing to an empty room. This means that it's hard to pin down what the purpose of the servant character will be until we see what sort of impact they have in the events of the plot. So, when Black Butler introduces the bumbling and quirky manor staff during the very first chapter, the audience is tricked into believing that they're meant for comedic relief and to serve as a contrast to Sebastian's insanely competent skills as a butler. It also makes you wonder why the hell Ciel even hired these people, when Sebastian could do, and often still does, their work significantly better than them.
You three. Remember why I hired you. Look after the place well.
Could you remind me why you hired them? Did you actually hire them to look after this place while you're gone? Because if so, I think you'd have better luck hiring a cat and a lit candle.
This leads into a fun plot twist during the Book of Circus, where they're revealed to be insanely competent killers, and their real job was just to protect the manor while pretending to be house servants.
You have been promoted. You are now one of my elite employees!
From that point forward, we slowly get more adventures featuring the servants, learning about their pasts and how they feel about the young master that they vow to serve. The common link between all of these people is made obvious from the start, the longing for a place to call home. Finian, Mayrin, and Bard all went through terrible ordeals before they met our main duo, and they all found themselves alone in the end, without anyone to rely on but themselves, because the world forced them into situations where they had no control over anything. They had no choice over their situation. The parallels. They're paralleling. So, when Sebastian and Ciel extended a hand and offered them a safe place to belong, a place where they could sleep warmly on a bed and eat delicious food, a place with other people like them who didn't quite fit in with everyone else, a place they could call home, it was a very easy decision. The found family, or family of choice, is a trope built upon forming a deeply emotional and personal bond with people that you don't necessarily have any blood ties with. with. It's a family forged by people that you choose because you feel safe around them and you care for them and they care about you in return. And in the case of the Phantom Hive family, or the Phantom Fam as the fans call it, they sure as hell care about each other. We see through internal and external dialogue that every one of them chose to stay by Ciel's side because it's where they want to be. I swear I'm not reaching, it's literally in the text. Snake compares them to the family he had back at the circus. Baldroy lovingly and begrudgingly accepts his place within the group of weirdos. Mayrin refuses to abandon them despite another offer coming from a really hot evil lady. She's stronger than me. Hello, ma'am! And Finney literally admits that he owes his life to Ciel and Sebastian, that he wouldn't be there if it weren't for them. They're all so important to me, you guys have no idea. But what about the young lord himself? Does Ciel care for his found family like they care about him? If you asked him directly, he'd say no, of course. But we know better. We know how we can perceive his true feelings. Ciel isn't a lad of words, he's a lad of action. And if we're judging him based on those, then yeah, he cares so much, it's so embarrassing for him. Obviously, he's the one that allowed the servants into the manor. In Mayrin's and Finian's case, he was more involved, going so far as to give Finney a name of his own, inspired by a book about a character with golden hair, and then making Sebastian teach Finney how to read so he could understand the story. Oh, they're so brothers-coded, the real Ciel could never. Mayrin's situation also showcased Ciel's kinder side, with him giving her delicious food and letting her eat as much as she wanted, and then even procuring glasses for her specific condition. And then there's Snake, who I have to admit got involved with the family through a slightly manipulative lie. But later on, we do see a genuine conversation when they're aboard the Campania, in a scene that wasn't adapted, but it's fine, I'm not salty. In this scene, Ciel defends Snake's honor and assures him that he's not ashamed of being seen with Snake, that Snake is his own person and he hasn't done anything to be embarrassed about, that he's just fine the way he is. Look, if you really like Snake, please don't read the manga. Save yourself the heartbreak, okay? In Bart's case, Sebastian was the main guy involved, and oh boy did they get involved. But we do see that Ciel also cares about his arson-prone American uncle. During chapter 85, we get what is essentially a shopping montage with the entire Phantom family. Ciel is going to check on a new product from his company, and along the way, he and Sebastian buy new glasses for Mayrin, a new hat for Finney, and a big bag for Snake's snakes. Bard tries to get some interesting reading material, but he's denied by a very displeased Sebastian.
Puzzling request from Baldroy.
Indeed. Does he even read books?
Young master! They've got more if you want one too.
Put that back.
Prude.
Later on, Ciel gives in a pack of candy cigarettes, since he was the only one to not get a gift. But also because Ciel wants him to cut down on his smoking habits, lest his tongue go bad. He is their chef after all, and we can't have a part of the household being sick. They make me sick! What the hell? But there's someone we haven't properly addressed yet. The Demon Man himself. Where does Sebastian Michaelis fit into this family dynamic that we're cooking up? Well, you see, Sebastian is the mother, the father, and the unholy spirit. Okay, let me explain. I mentioned in the previous section how Sebastian accidentally fell into the role of being Ciel's discount father figure. Now, am I saying that they canonically see each other as father and son? Absolutely not.
Oh, is it too hot? How very thoughtless of me. I should cool it. Goodness me. Oh, but you're acting like quite the spoilt child.
And you are being positively revolting. I order you to stop. Immediately!
For as lonely as his childhood was, Ciel's family did truly love him, and his father Vincent was fine as hell. Not just in the looks department, but also at being a genuine good dad. This is a bit of a tangent, but it's incredibly funny how popular Vincent Phantom Hive is, despite, being super dead. Sure, he gets a few flashback scenes sprinkled through the arcs, but in 2015 he was voted the 5th most popular character of the story. The 5th! Characters like Agni and Soma didn't even make it into the single digits category. That's how strong Vincent's game is. I do get it though. Vincent is a character wrapped in so much mystery, you can't help but brain rot just a little bit about him. How much did he know? What was his relation to the Undertaker? Did he uncover something about the Queen and get killed for it? Was he... You know, the flashbacks about his close relationship with Diedrich sure make me curious about that last question. You know, just bros being dudes.
You know there's a rumor going around?
What, that we're gay for each other?
Oh my god, Twizzler gummies! No, see, I'm straight, but like, if there was a man that I would marry, it would be Johnny.
How do you feel about that, Johnny?
It's not helping with the rumors.
I think the kiss you guys shared on my birthday isn't helping with the rumors.
Yeah, I just hate that he didn't give me enough tongue.
But, from what we can assume, Vincent truly did love his family. So no, I don't think that Ciel would, in any shape or form, try to replace his father with the demon that he's bound to. Or that somehow Sebastian intentionally made himself look like Vincent in order to lower Ciel's guard. While that would be a very cool detail, Yana has confirmed that this is the unfortunate result of a same-face syndrome case. So I am aware that there's nothing in-universe stating that they're actually viewed as father and son. What I am saying though is that when you interpret their character interactions as a reader, the casual dynamic Sebastian often has not only with Ciel, but also with the younger members of the cast, strongly gives off the dad/mom vibes. And I will die on this hill. I love this trope so much. It's so amusing to see this presumably hundreds of years old demon be juggled around by a bunch of rowdy children and being forced to teach them how to properly function in a noble human society. Sebastian basically jumps at the opportunity at being a nagging mother. He loves to brutally tutor someone in etiquette. He covers Ciel's one eye when Bart shows him a spicy magazine. He takes Finney's destructive hug in stride and just lightly scolds him to be more careful. He has a meltdown over Sieglinde cutting her hair without warning him. Ciel is having a breakdown and he's worried about his table manners. This man is so unserious, I am going to hit him with my car. He is holding that family together. He is so overworked and so done with his job. And of course, he's still gonna do it. Because no one else in this house knows how to do it right, and the young master doesn't even appreciate him, and he needs to juggle 6 things at once at every hour, and this family is a nightmare.
A single mom who works 2 jobs, who loves her kids and never stops.
Even Yana plays into this trope a little bit, with some scribbles in her Sebastian Expressions challenge showing him using an expression commonly said by mothers towards their children. And there's also chapter 96.5, where Sebastian pulls the classic motherly move of saying, "I'm just gonna check her baby tooth, okay? I'm just gonna look at it, trust me. Psych, I'm gonna pull it out now." And so he does. And Ciel is left traumatized. That's just a canon mom event. I'm sorry guys, he fathered so hard he mothered. This lightly comedic interpretation of Sebastian led to the rise of the dad-bastion and mom-dastion content in the fandom. And I know that not everyone's a fan of this interpretation given how messed up their canon dynamic is. But it's due to that messed up dynamic that the fans cook up these AUs. Because, in case you haven't noticed, Black Butler is a dark story. The canon material gets intense. So it's very understandable for the fans to create a more light-hearted approach to the story. It's our way to deal with the horrors, okay? What if there was a universe where the demon doesn't eat away the boy's soul the moment he achieves happiness, and instead just maybe takes a few years off his lifespan, raising that boy as a butler and as a father figure? Actually, there is a universe where that happens. It's in my favorite book, Sorcery of Thorns. Go read it. It's great. You cannot convince me the author didn't have any sort of Black Butler inspiration. The parallels of the male lead having a dead mom and brother, making a contract with the demon for more power, and said demon being obsessed with fashion and having a cat form are just too much to just be coincidences. I am dying on this conspiracy hill. Plus, the idea of Sebastian in a slightly different universe, without any predator and prey bullshit, just him being an overworked demon stepfather trying his best to raise a stubborn little boy into a proper English earl, that idea idea is just too funny. I'm not gonna pretend otherwise. Besides, there's another appeal to this interpretation other than it's funny. A lot of the fans genuinely want Ciel to be happy for a single second of his life. And yet, there's this silent understanding that it's likely not going to happen. We don't even know if he'll live after his next birthday, given how the plot of the manga is slowly but surely crawling towards a resolution. This kid is not making it to adulthood. I don't think he's even making it to 16. And that's kinda the point. Black Butler is funny and goofy and silly, but it's also fucking brutal, man. It's no wonder people wanna cling to the found family dynamics and the dad bashing they use. The canon content is great and I enjoy it, but even dedicated fans need a little pick-me-up from time to time, okay? Especially because, even after all of this I've said about the Phantom family dynamic, we are still left with a silent layer of dread and tragedy, because Yana can't ever let her characters be happy. Just like we know that Ciel's fate isn't gonna be pretty, we also know that this family we've come to know and love is doomed to end horribly. If you think about it, it kinda already started to crumble. Tanaka abandoned them and sided with the evil zombie twin. Bard almost died. Vinny updated his life trauma while accidentally adopting a bunch of similarly traumatized orphans. And Snake... Again, just don't read the manga. Don't make that mistake. Live in ignorant bliss. So, even if things settle down after the Blue Revenge arc, we know that at some point, Ciel is going to die at the hands of Sebastian, and the demon will leave them for good. This family bond is not meant to last. This home is meant to fall apart, and their place of belonging will eventually fade away. But hey, at least there will be the memories of the good old times. That's gotta be worth something, right? As you can see, I have a lot of feelings towards the supporting cast of Black Butler. This entire section got way too long, and I've been only talking about the main servants. Don't even get me started on the other side characters that I hold very closely to my heart. Soma, Agni, the Prefect 4, Ronald, my beloveds. But in the end, I decided to pick a very specific group of characters to highlight in the next section. Characters that, without a doubt, hold some of the strongest narratives in the story, and whose presences are very important across the entire narrative. And yet, they're often mistreated and misinterpreted by the fandom. I'm of course talking about the ladies, the girlies, and the queens. Let's talk about Black Butler's female cast. I think that Yana Toboso really enjoys women. Not as much as Ryoko Kui, but I think that Yana makes it pretty clear through her art that she really appreciates designing women. She's probably so used to drawing pretty boys and handsome men that when she has the opportunity to draw a lot of women, she goes all out. She puts her whole being into drawing the most gorgeous women into the series. And you know what? I can appreciate her for that. I might not always agree with Yana Toboso, but I sure as hell agree with her female characters. So, I'm dedicating this entire section to appreciating the female cast in Black Butler. Because while the story is about a little dude and his demon, there's a surprising amount of amazing women in plenty of important roles. I say surprising amount because this is still a shonen series, and those don't tend to give my girls a fair shot at the spotlight. But that's a can of worms for another Fisher and another day. I do wish I had the time to go over all the minor and major female characters, but I desperately want the script to be below 40 pages, and I'm already playing with fire. So instead, I'll focus on 4 specific characters that I think embody a lot of the complex writing Yana can achieve, and how them being women in this setting in particular also ends up being relevant to their arcs and positions in the narrative. But before I spend the rest of this section giving Yana a lot of praise over these lovely women, I do have to dock a few points first, because of the sheer disrespect with the character of Ran Mao. I mentioned earlier in this video how Yana chose a few questionable stereotypes for her Chinese characters, and I think that this one really takes the cake. We've known Ranmao ever since the Indian Butler arc, the third one in the series. She's been an established character alongside Lao for so long, and yet she has nothing to show for it. She barely has any speaking roles, and when she's featured in a scene, it's so that she can seduce a guy and appeal to the male gaze. I knew those pesky shonen tropes were hiding somewhere. And then, when I was catching up to the manga and saw that she was paired with Mei-rin for the Blue Revenge arc, I dared to hope that she would finally get the chance to shine and develop a full personality and have some witty banter with Mei-rin, and maybe we'd learn about her backstory as well. I once again had to put on my clown makeup. Because, sure, she gets a role in this arc, but I wouldn't exactly call it a good one. She once again needs to seduce a man for the sake of the mission, but this time, she gets kidnapped. Yay! And she needs to be saved by Mei-rin. Yay! Who also gets the backstory flashback, the banter dialogue with the hot maid villain, and most of the fight scenes. Yay! Look, I'm not saying that I don't love Mei-rin or that I didn't like her presence in the arc, but come on! Yana, you have two hands! Give both of my girls the respect they deserve. The main thing Ranmao gets to do in this arc is participate in a small section of the fight scene, which you know, is great. She's a badass and I really love that for her. I would have loved it even more if she wasn't naked during the majority of the fight, because we can't not sexualize her for even a single page. Yana, I would have gladly suspended my disbelief if she just had to fight wearing a blanket that somehow defied the laws of physics. Did you really need to do her like that? Come on! And some of you might be thinking, well, what's the problem? She still fought, didn't she? She was a girl boss. Isn't that enough? And to that I say, no, absolutely not. There's been this annoying misconception recently where if a female character is shown fighting and beating up people, that immediately equates to her having a good character and a relevant presence in the story. People see a girl being badass and think, well, that's that. Feminism wins, girls can fight now. Let's pack up our things and go home. The story got too woke now. And that couldn't be farther from the truth. This line of thinking is part of the problem. Sure, girls can fight. I love when they're badasses kicking butts. But if that's all they do in the plot, it makes them no better than some background grunts just filling up the action scene quota. Let the girls fight, but also give them a reason for fighting. Plenty of the kick-ass women we've had so far have pretty good characters built around their fighting ability, which makes them even better. What a surprise! Ranmao unfortunately has nothing so far. And you know she's not gonna get any major role after this. The manga's building up to the ending climax. I'll be genuinely shocked if Ranmao gets anything important to do before the end. Rest in pieces, my girl. We barely knew you.
I hate to say it. I hope I don't sound ridiculous. I don't know who this man is. I mean, he could be walking down the street. I wouldn't know a thing. Sorry to this man.
Okay, going back to the good examples I mentioned before, let's talk about a relatively recent addition to the female cast, but one that played a pretty important role in both arcs that she's been featured in, the Emerald Witch herself, Sieglinde. This lovely lady is the focus character of the appropriately named Emerald Witch arc, and we got to learn a great deal about her. Sieglinde was raised in a closed-off, isolated environment, with the fake narrative of being the chosen descendant of an ancient witch, all in the hopes of manipulating her genius aptitude into creating a highly dangerous chemical weapon. Despite this, Sieglinde still managed to grow into a rather kind and generous girl, with an insane insatiable curiosity, a thirst for knowledge, and dreams about seeing the wonders of the outside world. She was also incredibly lonely, relying on her caretaker/father figure for company, and latching onto Ciel and Sebastian once they stumbled into the picture. Sieglinde goes through a heartbreaking and deeply emotional journey about challenging everything she's ever known, and venturing into dangerous territory for the sake of using her skills to help people and save lives. She actually parallels Ciel in a lot of ways, being forced into a harmful situation against her will, but challenging the odds and refusing to give up, even when the world threw everything it could at her in an attempt to snuff out her light. I really like Sieglinde, because even though she hasn't been around for long, and despite taking a more supportive role in the following arc, she has this wit and charm about her that you can't help but be endeared to her antics. That being said, I could do with less sex jokes. She's 11. I get that kids that age start going through the horrors known as puberty, but did we really need a joke about her having a threesome with Sebastian and Ciel? And did we really need to have Ciel, the child with established SA trauma, be harassed by her touching him inappropriately without his consent? Did we really need that, Yana? Cause I don't think we did. You can be funny in other ways. Please stop using the 11-year-old for sex jokes. That feels like the bare minimum to ask. Editing Lily here, I just want to quickly clarify that I'm not saying this to bash on Sieglinde's character in any way. She's been established to be a very isolated child that doesn't know social norms or proper conduct. But there are other ways to spin this trait of hers into a joke that doesn't cause a tone clash with the story. Jokes that they already did in this arc. So, these types of jokes don't feel really thought out. But this is a problem not just with Black Butler, but also with plenty of shows that exaggerate tropes for the sake of, well, comedy. They get lost in the sauce of the joke and don't realize that the punchline makes the character seem out of character, or how horribly it clashes with the previously established character traits. Regardless, I rather chalk up those moments to bad writing decisions from the actual creators than a sin from the fictional character. Okay, now back to the video. Next up on the list, we have Madame Red and Grell. I'm associating them here because they were initially introduced as a duo, the Jack the Ripper duo, and their dynamic is kinda essential to understanding their story arcs. They're also girlfriends. However, I will explain them separately since they have plenty of presence to stand on their own. Let's start with the one that was taken from us much too soon. Madame Red, or Angelina, or Anne, as she lets me call her, was Ciel's aunt on his mother's side, and she had the rather unique role of being one of the few family members that Ciel kept close contact with after he got back. His father's side of the family appears occasionally, but they don't really get involved with his work that often, and there's a reason why Anne kept pushing to be in Ciel's life again despite his protests. Unresolved familial trauma. It's in the genetics, baby. We're 3 for 3. You see, Anne was in love with Vincent. Because duh, who wouldn't be? Have you seen him? But as we know, Vincent chose Rachel, Angelina's sister, to be his wife instead. Black Butler's love triangle walked so Hamilton's could run, okay? Even so, things remained peaceful for a while. Anne was still a constant presence in her sister's life, being the one to help the birth of the twins and even becoming Ciel's doctor during his sickly Victorian child episodes. Eventually, Anne got married to a man that accepted the fact he wasn't the number one in her heart, but loved her either way. She was with his child and they would be building their own family together. But then, tragedy struck, the first of many times for this cursed family. After a carriage accident, Angelina's husband died, and so did her unborn child, with the doctors having to remove her uterus to save her life, meaning that she would no longer be able to get pregnant. While she recovered in the hospital, Rachel invited her to the twins' birthday party, their 10th birthday. the day of the fire. And so, Anne was forced to confront yet another loss. But this time, we get an interesting perspective from her inner monologue. She sort of envies her sister for being able to die by Vincent's side, die next to the man that she loved. This twisted way of thinking from Anne helps to set up the actions she'll take later on. It's also important to point out what she thinks when Orciel comes back. She compares him to Rachel and how much they look alike. This was a bit surprising to me given how it's way more common to compare the boys to Vincent. But I think this goes to show how much Anne truly loved her sister, seeing her in places few people ever would. Plus, with the benefit of hindsight, it's sadly ironic that she compared this Ciel to her sickly and frail sister, given how he was also the one in constant bed rest thanks to his fits of asthma. Madame Red was apparently closer to the truth than she thought. But then, we come to her slow downfall. Because Angelina worked as a doctor, and a common procedure that she had to perform were abortions. Many adult workers came to her seeking one, since if they were pregnant, it would severely impact their way of earning an income and sustaining themselves. And you know, good on Anne for being pro-choice as a woman in the medical field during Victorian England. That's very progressive of her. That being said, I can't give her too much praise since she does become a serial killer, specifically targeting those female patients, so you know, not very being a girl's girl on her part. But hey, we all make mistakes, right? Yeah, given her amount of unresolved trauma, being confronted daily with the reality of many women choosing to not carry their pregnancy full term and, in her mind, dumping away the thing she wanted the most, was not great for her dwindling mental health. Now, did she consider the economical and social situation of these women, who very likely could not raise a baby and still survive on the wages from their work? No, she didn't, because of the aforementioned unresolved trauma. Come on, guys, keep it up. All that she could think about was the multiple tragedies that she had gone through, everything she had to endure, and everything that was taken from her forever. So, yeah, she did do some murders, but hey, thanks to that, she ended up meeting Grell. So, all's well that ends well, right? I'm sorry, girl, I tried, I can't defend you.
He was the best guy around.
What about the people he murdered?
What murder?
Now we're talking about girls supporting girls though, since Miss Grell was incredibly hyped to help Madame Red get all the killing out of her system, leading to them becoming the Jack the Ripper duo for a while. But before we talk about my beloved Reaper Queen, I have to end Angelina's analysis by talking about her death and her impact on Ciel's character journey, because her feelings towards her dear nephew are quite complex, and you know I just eat that up. We know that Angelina loved her sister and her nephews greatly, and yet none of them had seemingly ever come close to her love of Vincent. When Ciel originally came back, she welcomed him with open arms, and yet she couldn't stop herself from thinking, why did this child survive but not Vincent? His child came back, but he's dead. The child of my sister, who stole that man from me. Why wasn't I the one to marry Vincent instead? Why must his child walk the same path as him? Why must he come to arrest me? Why must you take this away from me too? During their final confrontation, it all pointed to Anne fully intending on killing Ciel to avoid being captured as the one behind the killings. And yet, she couldn't do it. She faltered. She saw the face of her beloved sister on her beloved nephew, and she couldn't deal the final blow. And Ciel, for his part, stopped Sebastian from killing her before she could harm the young lord, and chose to not shoot her with his hidden gun. It's not clear why either of them made such decisions, why they both stopped themselves from killing the other. Was it because they were family? Was it because they loved one another deep down? Was it because they were scared? Who knows? Ciel claims that he didn't do anything because Sebastian would protect him no matter what. But is that the full truth? Part of me wants to believe that there's more to it. After all, he still thinks of her when he remembers all the lives he had to sacrifice to continue living. He sacrificed her. He wouldn't allow for someone to keep deceiving him, to keep trampling over his duty. I wonder if he felt betrayed by her, you know? But that would have required him to trust her, and I don't think he had gotten that far. Still, Angelina was his aunt. They were close before and after his return. She always fussed about him and his job as the Queen's guard dog. Did she love him? Maybe. Did he love her? Probably at some point. This is why I love the funeral scene so much, when he places on her a dress of her hated and beloved color. You could feel that this was very emotional for him too. Maybe he buried the last bits of his love for her alongside her corpse, his beloved aunt, the Madam in Bloody Red, gone forever. But another person remains that would also carry on Angelina's memory in the form of her iconic red coat. The one and only, the queen, the icon, the fan favorite, Grell the Grim Reaper. The journey of Grell is fascinating to think about, because both her as a character as well as the fandom's attitude towards her have changed a lot with time. Let's start by explaining how Grell was introduced. Like I mentioned, Grell was a package deal alongside Madame Red. The two of them were introduced simultaneously in the Red Butler arc, with Grell disguised as a male butler to accompany Anne and also hide her true Grim Reaper nature. Once her identity is discovered, she drops the act and goes back to behaving like her usual self, a very energetic, confident, and outspoken woman with a flair for the dramatic. Grell can be a lot when she's first introduced, I have to admit. She's quite impulsive and prone to going along with whatever whim she has at the moment. So, sometimes it feels like she's moving at a completely different pace than the rest of the characters, acting separate from the plot in occasional bursts until she's pulled back in. This, at least early on, was played for comedy, and so was Grell's entire character. A small detail I didn't mention is that early portrayals of Grell show her as an extremely predatory and incompetent woman. She gets obsessed with Sebastian to an uncomfortable degree. She seemingly enjoys being mistreated. She doesn't do her job. She constantly makes sex jokes, and she's relegated to being the comedic punching bag, because you're apparently meant to find her over-the-top attitude embarrassing at best or annoying at worst. So, this portrayal of Grell is overall pretty bad, to the point that it bleeds into plenty of harmful stereotypes, because not only does Grell have a pretty popular sapphic reading with Madame Red, she's also a trans woman. I'll keep this brief because it's pretty common knowledge at this point if you bother to look it up, but Grell identifies as a woman. There are multiple instances where she calls herself a lady in-universe, the most common one being her interview in the character guidebook. Yana Toboso also refers to Grell as a woman, asking for her to be portrayed as such. The most common source of the misconception regarding Grell being a man is due to the use of he/him pronouns in most of the English translations when referring to her, but this is apparently only present in the translated text. A Tumblr post that I'll link in the description analyzed all the released chapters up until that point, keeping track of both honorifics and pronouns used when referring to Grell, and in all instances there was no reference to Grell being addressed as a male. This is because Japanese doesn't use such a gendered language like English or Portuguese, so some terms can basically be gender neutral or applied to multiple genders. So, if you're in the Western fandom, please be aware to use she/her pronouns when referring to Grell. She is a business-focused girl boss and she must be respected as such. Though Yana certainly didn't help with that interpretation at first. By making one of your most popular queer characters fall into the stereotype of the queer degenerate psychopath, she kinda wrote herself into a corner, and you can see that Yana realized that too. Beginning with her reintroduction in the Book of Circus, Grell started to appear in sporadic bursts during every other arc, and every time she appears, her character seems a bit more developed. She's no longer just a source of slapstick comedy at her own expense, but instead is more more of a career-focused woman who can hold a serious conversation and yet still be charming and fun when needed.
As Reapers, our first priority must always be soul collection. Let's get this over with, shall we?
This lines up with how Yana wanted to correct the fans' interpretations of the character, not wanting for her to seem incompetent at her job and instead focus on her being a strong woman. Now, I'm not gonna pretend that Grell being quote-unquote corrected is the greatest way to go about this. Ideally, Yana would have just, gotten it right from the start. But I guess that's a lot to expect from writing queer characters in good old 2007. You can also see this less than stellar writing in the portrayal of Nina Hopkins. If you're on anime only, or if you just keep up with the major events of the manga, you probably have no idea who I'm talking about. And that's to be expected. Nina is a side character in the manga, often appearing in the short breaks between arcs or acting in a supportive role during the Blue Cult arc. This is because Nina is the assigned tailor of the Phantom Hive family and is also heavily implied to be a lesbian. She makes her preference towards women and disdain towards men abundantly clear. Hooray! A minor side character is implied queer representation. Unfortunately, like I said, she also falls into the harmful stereotype of being aggressively sexual and perverted. The first thing she does in her debut chapter is grab Mayrin's chest and thigh in front of everyone present. I don't like it when male characters do this, so I sure as hell won't like it when female characters do it instead. There's also some questionable comments that she makes about only being interested in boys under 15, but I'm hoping to God that it's in the context of making clothes for younger boys and nothing else. Yana, no. Bad Yana. And I know that some of you might think I'm being way too nitpicky about this, but I would argue that asking for the few queer-coded characters to not be perverts and, not be into children is the bare minimum to ask, right? Thankfully, just like with Grell, Nina has gotten a bit better across her appearances. That is, she hasn't molested anyone on screen again, and her most recent appearance in Mayrin's flashback is actually quite heartwarming. But their cute interactions are unfortunately dragged down by the chronological timeline, since this latest appearance of hers is a flashback, and the next time they interact on screen is the damn groping scene. Nina is unfortunately one of the many aspects of Black Butler that I choose to just not perceive the weird parts in order to fully appreciate the fun potential. I mean, come on, Nina's a fashion icon. She's the one responsible for Ciel's killer looks in all the official arts. She's making strides for female fashion. She's a successful businesswoman. She openly hates Sebastian and trash talks him to his face. She's so good and so funny, which is why the damn stereotypes are so annoying. I swear I'm gonna break into Black Butler HQ, grab Nina, and walk out before they realize what hit them. At least with Grell, I can appreciate that Yana realized her fuck-ups and decided to give her the respect that she deserved. Grell didn't become a flawless and perfect character, but at least now she's a character, instead of a mesh of harmful tropes in the form of a very pretty woman. And I am happy for her. But you might recall that I also mentioned how the fans' attitude towards Grell has also changed over the years. Aside from the constant misgendering and casual insulting that her character was subjected to, another aspect of Grell's personality made her public enemy number one. She dared to like Sebastian.
Hi, Bessie dear. What else besides destiny could have brought us together again today?
Coincidence.
Oh, you're always so cold, and that makes me so very, very hot, my dear boy.
Characters like Grell, Mayrin, Beast, and that one nun I forgot the name of got all basically burned alive by the fandom because they not only showed interest in the fan-favorite demon, but also because they apparently got in the way of the most popular ship at the time. This is an unfortunately common problem in fandom circles to this day. It doesn't even need to be a female character. Anyone that is an obstacle to the most popular ship gets absolutely dogpiled at every possible opportunity. But just like in real life, the treatment of female characters that get sorted into that role is way more vicious and aggressive compared to the male characters that fall into that role, with way less frequency, might I add. Women are often seen as the enemy by a lot of shippers, and Black Butler is no exception to that. Any woman that showed interest in Sebastian or that was involved with him in some fashion, even when he was the one manipulating them into being intimate with him, became the enemy. Because how dare these women find the purposefully designed to be hot demon to be, hot? Have they no shame? This double standard that permeates through fandom can easily be traced back to misogynistic roots, where it's easier to hate on women and favor men, even if they're fictional characters, and even if the female character is way more similar to said male favorites than one might think. The perfect example of this would be Lizzy, the final character I want to highlight, and the one that has gone through the most intense roller coaster of fan opinions towards her. So, who is Lizzy? Elizabeth Mitford is introduced as Ciel's cousin and fiancée, because if there's one thing anime fans can't escape from, it's the anime cousin curse. I swear, the one time Yana decides to follow historical accuracy is also when I wish she hadn't, because these two could have had such a cute chemistry. But oh well. Aside from that, Lizzy appears like a very energetic, bubbly, and friendly young lady. She loves cute things, she loves fashion, and she loves Ciel, the truest girly pop girl you'll ever encounter. Sure, she can be a bit stubborn and strong-headed, like when she threw a tantrum over Ciel's family ring not matching with the outfit that she picked for him, but she's more than allowed to behave childishly, given that she's, 14 years old, and still very much a child. So yeah, Lizzy was just a cute girl who wanted the best for Ciel. She meant well and she wanted him to be happy. She has made a few mistakes here and there, but she has apologized for them and tried to be a source of friendly comfort in Ciel's life. Something that boy desperately needed despite his protests. So then, why is Lizzy still so divisive amongst the fandom? Opinions on her have suffered the most extreme pivots after every major appearance that she has. Plus, compared to some beloved fan favorites, she has plenty of screen time to be analyzed, and yet her character still continues to be greatly misunderstood. What's the deal with that? Well, there's plenty of possible answers. Most aren't great.
I'll give you 3 reasons. 1, she's a female. 2, she's not a boy. And 3, and most importantly, she's a girl!
To start off, just like how any woman that showed interest in Sebastian was burned alive, so was any girl that spent a significant amount of time with Ciel, the main ones being Sieglinde, Doll, and of course, Lizzy, his established betrothed.
Could you excuse me?
Shipping business aside though, it was pretty rare to see any genuine Elizabeth enjoyers in the early fandom days, due to her childish and energetic mannerisms making people dismiss her as just an annoying brat. But to be completely honest with you guys, I've always been a big fan of Lizzy, even before her big turnabout moments during Book of Atlantic. In fact, I'm pretty sure that since I was around Ciel's age when I first watched Black Butler, Lizzy was probably one of my first anime crushes. Like, of course, my little repressed bi self didn't realize that at the time, but I was always looking forward to the episodes she featured in. The more you know. And keep in mind that I only had the anime material to work with. Lizzy was just so pretty and fun, I loved her immediately. And I still do. You couldn't make me hate her then, and you certainly won't be able to now. So, in this whole section, I'm just gonna get a bit more subjective, okay? This is personal to me. If you don't like Lizzy, that's completely fine. But I love her. And I'm tired of my girl being slandered. Consider this my big in defense of Lizzy rant. Let me have this. So, the first major shift in opinion towards Lizzy came during the Book of Atlantic. In fact, it's pretty common to see fans commenting that they didn't like Lizzy before, but after Book of Atlantic, she became their favorite character. And that's pretty understandable, given that she has two big character moments during the movie. The first being her girl boss action scene in the zombie fight, and the second being her introspective flashback, explaining to the audience how she views herself both as a girl and as Ciel's fiancé in the social context that they were raised into. The problem comes when most people only focus on that first moment, the one where she's being badass and kicking zombie butts. Because like I said before, if a girl fights, that's enough character development for her, right? And please don't get me wrong, her fight is amazing. The choreography and the animation elevate the scene exponentially. Plus, it's incredibly charming to see how she incorporates traditionally feminine elements in her fighting style, with twirls and spins as if she was dancing ballet while wielding the blades. I'm not here to diminish Lizzy's fight, okay? It's genuinely fantastic. But it's that second moment, that emotionally charged inner monologue, that ends up explaining so many of Lizzy's previous and future actions. Lizzy has had her whole life decided for her, playing into the thematic narrative of the lack of choice. She has been Ciel's betrothed for probably as long as she can remember, given that in the flashback with the real Ciel, Lizzy couldn't be older than 10 years old because he was still around. And we see that even while they're that young, Lizzy already had to be aware of his preferences for becoming the ideal wife. This worldview of hers was molded from childhood, impacting her view of herself and making it so she was even afraid of growing older or becoming taller, and losing that cute wife aesthetic that she had cultivated for the sake of Ciel's image. This all came to a head during the Blue Coat arc and the infamous Volume 28 scene. The entire arc started with the intention of bringing Lizzy back home. Sure, Ciel got a little sidetracked with his idol group business, but everything he did was to take away the power from Lavat's music hall and to ensure that he could rescue Lizzy safely. So, imagine everyone's shock, both in and out of the story, when Lizzy tries to kick Sebastian's ass, to varying degrees of success, okay? My girl tried her best. And then she escapes from the manor, goes back to the music hall, and decides to side with the zombie Ciel, essentially throwing your boy under the bus. What the heck, Lizzy? The people exclaimed. Why would she do that? The flashback, people. I told you, it holds all the answers. But even so, a few fans, especially hardcore Ciel fans, immediately started to hate Lizzy again for doing this, seeing her as a backstabber that didn't appreciate everything Ciel had done for her. And you know, that's one way you can interpret that for sure, but obviously that's not the interpretation I vibe with, so let me explain my take on this whole ordeal. Let's put ourselves in Lizzy's shoes for a moment, shall we? Can you imagine shaping your entire life towards a goal that was established for you, making personal sacrifices regarding your own interests, and refusing to indulge in what you like to do because you needed to live up to the standards of that goal? And then, out of nowhere, you find out that you've been lied to, that this farce has been going on for years, and that you're just another number in the equation. To be honest, I'd be devastated and angry too. We readers know why Ciel is doing what he's doing, and we know everything that led him up to this point. But Lizzy doesn't know. She lacks critical information, and she's making bad decisions because she's not in a good emotional state. fact, both her and her family are being misled into thinking that RCL is a criminal and that his brother is back safe and sound. I can understand feeling miffed that the other adults, especially Lizzy's parents and older brother, are just letting this happen without raising proper concerns. But like I said, it goes to show how insignificant RCL's existence has been in the grand scheme of things. The nobles just need an earl to lead the family. They don't really care about who it is. But Lizzy does care. She has very strong opinions about which person she was meant to marry, and it's made pretty clear that she's conflicted about her decision regarding this whole mess. Marrying CL isn't her choice after all, it's her duty. Just like with Lizzy's development in Book of Atlantic, people only focused on her betrayal and seemed to completely ignore the emotional breakdown that she goes through just a few chapters after that. And I'll once again remind you, she's 14. Fans like it when CL acts his age, so why is it wrong for Lizzy to act like hers as well? Do you really expect an emotionally drained teen girl to make level-headed and mature decisions after everything she went through? Just take a look at her during the entire scene. That sure doesn't look like radiant happiness to me.
You came back! You're here! I was so worried I'd never see you again, but you're here!
And speaking of CL's role in all of this, I can't help but be confused when hardcore CL fans hate on Lizzy's current character arc. Because when you stop to think about it, aren't these two meant to be similarly tragic characters? One of CL's most appealing traits as a character is how complex he is. I spent an entire section of this video talking about exactly that. But then, so is Lizzy. In a parallel to CL, she too is a child that was forced to grow up too fast to fit into a role decided for her from birth. Lizzy is just a year older than the twins, and she still had to mature quickly to fit into the very dangerous position of being the wife of the queen's guard dog. An incredibly dangerous role to be in due to, all the political enemies. Because of this, she had to learn how to hone her sword fighting skills in order to protect not only CL, but also herself. She had to learn how to act as a supportive role to her husband-to-be. She had to learn her place in society as a girl, all while still being incredibly young. Not to mention that she also carries her own set of emotional scars and trauma. Like I mentioned, Lizzy is the twins' cousin, which means that on the day of the fire, she lost not only her cousin and her betrothed, but also her uncle and aunt. And knowing how Lizzy is so loving and caring, plus being aware of how often she visited the manor to play with the real CL, it's pretty obvious that she was very close with the Phantom Hives. And because of that, she too felt the loss and grief that comes with losing beloved family members. And then, when RCL, playing as her supposed betrothed, suddenly came back, she had to go through the entire process of accepting that he was alive, but not quite right. He was a little different, in ways that she couldn't really pinpoint, and nothing ever felt the same again. It's a small detail that the anime adaptations unfortunately don't feature, but Lizzy is the only one that pays attention to the subtle differences RCL has compared to his brother. There are moments when she notices that some of RCL's actions and mannerisms don't really fit her memories of the real CL, but she just bottles that up. She buries those doubts away and keeps standing at his side. Because what else was she supposed to do? She was raised to love and support CL, no matter what. All of this culminated in her creating an exaggerated persona that she can play into, but that's not all that she is. Given that sometimes we see a small private glimpse of a Lizzy that is more muted, melancholic, a complex character created alongside all the sunshines and rainbows and smiles. Lizzy chooses to act like the cute and lovely wife because she was taught that that was her place, and she she had to make peace with it. This was supposed to be her simple love story, a betrothed that came back from a terrible tragedy, reuniting with her through a miracle of love. They'd grow up and grow old by each other's sides. A fairy tale story with a happy ending. Everything was going to be fine, and she would have fulfilled her duty. And then, everything was turned upside down. Suddenly, Lizzy is dragged into this insane conspiracy involving the twins and supernatural forces and zombies defying death. And maybe even a war with the queen? And the worst part is that Lizzy didn't even do anything wrong. She didn't have any fault in this. All she did was dare to dream that she'd be a happy wife and marry the person she thought she loved. This 14-year-old girl is seeing her entire reality crash around her. Suddenly, her fiancé is revealed to be a fake. He was lying to her all this time. She poured out her heart for him, tore off her mask for him, loved him and vowed to protect him. And now their bond is shattered because she believed that he was tricking her maliciously, mocking her conviction and dedication to their relationship. And again, we as the audience know that RCL doesn't think like that. In fact, we can infer that he cares quite a lot about Lizzy in his own way. He's always worried about her safety and he's constantly indulging in her requests because deep down he probably just wants to see her happy. Lizzy was close to his brother. She's the only person left in his family that's around his age. They helped one another survive and she cared about him with no hidden schemes or secrets. So I think it's safe to assume that Ciel appreciated Lizzy and didn't want to hurt her. But she still ended up hurt. She's heartbroken and she's vulnerable. In other words, she's in the perfect state to be manipulated by the carefully crafted lies created by the evil goth duo over here. The Undertaker and the real Ciel apparently plan to turn as many people as possible against RCL. And things have been working out terribly well for them, with Soma, Finny, and Lizzy rapidly losing their sunshine character traits in the worst possible ways. This is what creates the tragedy of the narrative, the lack of choice at being involved in this scheme, inflicted upon characters that should not suffer the consequences for it. This is between the Undertaker and his weird obsession with the Phantom Hive family. This is between the two brothers and arguably between the Queen and the Phantom Hives. Characters like Lizzy are an afterthought in the grand scheme of things. They're collateral damage. And that's already intentionally devastating. But when you realize that despite all the narrative buildup and tragic parallels that Lizzy shares with the twins, she's still horribly treated by parts of the fandom. And oh boy, that really grinds my gears. To supplement my argument, let me show you a lovely pair of artworks done by Yana Toboso herself, where Lizzy and Ciel, unclear which one but honestly both fit, are drawn in mirrored poses, as they look down at the big shoes they're supposed to fit into, in accordance to the parts assigned to them by their families and by society. That's why, even though he's currently behaving like a little shit, I can also sympathize with the position the real Ciel was forced into. The brothers and Lizzy paint such a tragic narrative, especially because they're just kids. As far as we know, they don't have all the important information regarding their circumstances. They're all just pawns in a larger game being played by forces bigger than them. And such a twisted game pushes these children to fight back with whatever tools they have available, ensuring their temporary victory, even when we all know that in the end, they'll all lose, one way or another.
I am Elizabeth, daughter of the Marquess of Scotney. My father is Alexis Leon Midford, Knight Guard Cross. I will marry the Queen's guard dog.
She loved Ciel. Or well, she was told that she needed to love Ciel. But did she really love him? She wasn't even able to distinguish him from his twin. His twin. Did he find all of this amusing? Toying around with Lizzy's heart? How despicable. How cruel. They were family, weren't they? She was going to be his sister-in-law. They were supposed to be friends. Friends. Were they friends? Were they even close? Did Lizzy ever care about him? I mean, he was often sick, so they didn't play a lot or spend much time together, but even so, aren't these just excuses? Did she ever care about him? Did she ever care about CL? If his twin came back as his true self, would she have cared? Would anyone have cared? Is she a bad person? I hope that after all of this, I was at least able to sanely convey why I love Lizzy so much and why she's one of my favorite characters in Black Butler, bias and all. She literally can do no wrong in my eyes. Yana could make Lizzy stab CL and I'd still go, you know, let's hear her out. It was his time, he wouldn't have lasted very long. And hey, even if after all of my carefully constructed arguments, I still haven't convinced you to join the Lizzy Midford fan club, then only one option remains. Peer pressure. Look at her. Look at her. She is a ball of sunshine and happiness. She is my angel, my daughter, my little mint chocolate cupcake. I love her more than myself.
Talented, brilliant, incredible, amazing, show-stopping, spectacular, never the same, totally unique.
Lizzy has so much potential and so much depth to her character, I 100% believe this won't be the last we see of her. If Doll, of all people, managed to have a comeback 13 years after her supposed death, then so can my girl Elizabeth come back and have another girl boss moment. I have faith. She will return in all of her girly pop princess glory. Plus, nowadays, a lot more people have recognized that Lizzy is the cutest and most precious being that must be protected at all costs. And that's a win in my book. I just really hope that she has a happy ending, you know? She's gonna get traumatized all over again once both CLs inevitably die anyway. But at least let her be best friends with Sieglinde and have them be girl bosses together. Please, Yana, I'm begging here. All in all, my goal with both of these sections was to show some appreciation to female characters in general. This franchise doesn't give the main focus to the women, and yet I was still able to brain rot all of this with just the amount of content they already have. So, I hope this was enough to show how big of an impact well-written female characters can have in a story, and how they deserve to be treated with more respect by authors and fandoms alike. This isn't to say that you can't dislike any female characters. By all means, think of them however you'd like, but at least do the courtesy of judging them based on their actions within the material, and not because of assumptions created completely outside of the story or influenced by harmful biases. Plus, remember that critiquing a character's actions is completely different than constantly hating on them, just to make that clear. It's also important to have patience and wait to see where the story goes. It's very common nowadays for fans to get impatient over a character's bad actions during episode 1 of a show, when they're still missing, you know, the whole rest of the story. In Black Butler especially, a lot of characters have gone through slow development arcs across the long duration of the manga. So, try to keep in mind how their actions might have different meanings further down the line. Yana likes to play the long game, people. We'll be in retirement homes by the time we get to the end of the story. And hey, in my biased little heart, I usually end up being a girl's girl. We already deal with so much shit in real life that even if a pretty fictional lady is doing unspeakable horrors, I'll probably be in the corner cheering for her anyway. Oh, she hurt the main character's feelings and tried to kill him. Boo-hoo. Let her kick ass and be mean. Supports women's wrongs, baby.
Yes, queen, slay! Slay! Slay your enemies, ruler of one of the realms of men!
I still still really like Black Butler, and I'm very glad that it's back. I found a lot of awesome creators thanks to this season 4 renaissance, and I hope that more parts of the story get adapted in the future, especially since things get even more dramatic past this point. But I'm sure that you realize that while most of this video has been me talking about all the things I enjoy about the series, I don't really look at it with rose-tinted glasses. Black Butler has plenty of glaring issues present both in the story and in the character dynamics. And since she's, the creator, Yana Toboso is usually the one held accountable for such issues. I don't think it's correct to come to any conclusions about her in real life based on what she writes, nor should anyone send any sort of harassment her way. But it's important to be careful about the real-world impacts that works of fiction can have, and that we shouldn't put creators or authors on a pedestal. Instead, let's enjoy their works with still present critical lenses. That way, if they fumble the bag, we can make them take accountability for their mistakes, and above all else, consume content responsibly. But now, we finally arrive at the question proposed by the title of the video. Why does Black Butler keep getting renewed? Well, I think that all I've said so far sums up the answer pretty well. This story has a little bit of everything for a lot of different people, ranging from beautifully animated fight scenes, to slow and character-driven moments. It's a comedy, it's a tragedy, it's a unique look into justice and a fascinating portrayal of what it means to be human.
This is just how humans are! Sebastian, do you understand me? It's who we are!
It's grotesque and heartbreaking, while still managing to be comforting, evoking a certain sense of joy and of belonging. It's a selfish, cruel, and utterly captivating tale. All in all, Black Butler is quite the contradiction. Iconic and nostalgic, but also quite controversial and convoluted for beginners. It's eye-catching enough to pull back old fans that had long abandoned the franchise, while still being addictive to the point of keeping people hooked since day one. So again, why do I think they keep remaking Black Butler? Well, honestly, no one's doing it like them. Good or bad, the fact that it's so unique and a little insane adds an extra layer of charm, especially given our current times, where the creative drought from big companies leads to the same content being released in slightly different packaging, and bland stories with no real impact get produced despite the lack of demand, just for the sake of achieving profit. At least with Black Butler, the fans are actually screaming and crying and begging for more. So hey, I won't complain when they keep on feeding us. By all means, keep it coming. It's legitimately an enjoyable investment of my time. This series is silly as hell, pun very much intended, so I do plan to keep up with whatever Black Butler is cooking up next. I mean, I've made it this far, might as well see it through to the end, yeah? I just really hope that Yana doesn't make me regret it and I end up having to eat all of my 20,000 words. Now that would be very embarrassing for me.
Look at me. Do not blow this for us.
Thank you all so much for watching. If you've made it this far, congratulations! We've reached the end of today's voyage. Careful as you disembark, since your luggage might have gotten jostled around a bit during the landing. this is probably going to be my longest video yet. Even I was surprised at how long the script got. But hey, turns out that when a show you've been into ever since middle school gets a fourth wind, you end up with quite a lot to say. But I'm glad I was able to express my feelings towards this story in a way that felt semi-coherent. I tried my best, okay, and I really enjoyed making it. Also, while I was double checking everything to write this last section, I realized that I was very mean to Sebastian, huh? I bullied him a lot during this video. And you know what? Good. It's what he deserves. Look, I absolutely adore the guy, but he's also the kind of character where they're super fun to hate on, you know? He's an insufferable jerk, but also the silliest baby girl, and those sentiments are not mutually exclusive. Know that every time I kick him down, it's with love. And actually, the same goes for my feelings towards this series as a whole, now that I think about it. Huh, who would have thought? But hey, what do you guys think about Black Butler? Are you a longtime fan or did you get into it recently? And have you been enjoying season 4? I know I have, and I really hope they continue to make more parts. I need to see the contract flashback animated so bad. If you wanna see me lose my mind over Black Butler, Twisted Wonderland, or any other fandom that I'm involved in, then please check out my social media. The links will be in the description below. And if you enjoyed this video, then consider watching another one and hitting the subscribe button. That way you'll help out my channel grow and you also won't miss any new voyages we take in the future. Above all else, I hope you all have a great day or night, stay safe, stay hydrated, and I'll see you next time.